All right. So my name is Ian Anderson. I'm a lead DevSecOps engineer with Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren at their DAMNAC activity down in Virginia Beach. And today I'm going to kind of talk through, my journey into this, DevOps, DevSecOps world. What I'm working on today and kind of some of the trends and where I see kind of the future, or some of the changes that we need to take place for DevSecOps and digital transformation to really move forward, especially within the federal government space. As probably most of you know, it can be a challenge at times. So, kind of where my journey began. We take a look at it. So did I start off in computers and doing computer science, from a young age and coding everything up? I started, with history. When I first went to school, I wanted to, go into history, become a history teacher, history professor, maybe at a college. I had no experience at all with actually doing anything with computers, which is quite interesting. I've found, talking with a lot of people within the DevOps, DevSecOps field, a lot of them actually started with a passion in history, and have moved towards the computer science field. Um, with that, like I said, I went to Christopher Newport University. Alyssa Cole with ATARC, as well as from Christopher Newport University. So when I first got there, having the aspiration of being a history teacher or a history professor in the future, I had a lot of family in the IT field, mostly a lot of my uncles who have started their own businesses, sold their own businesses, high up in corporations. And one of them was Joseph Demarest, who was the assistant director with the FBI Cyber Division. As some of you may know, with ATARC, Trent Tayama was the director for the FBI Cyber Division, so they worked closely together. But he called me up. He said, teaching is an honorable field, but something with computers may have a little more money in it. So it got me thinking, well, I guess I can take a look at it. With zero experience in computers, I approached the computer science, engineering, and physics department at Christopher Newport University. I said, yeah, what do you have with these computer things? To keep me on track, they said, yeah, you can take a look at computer science. We also have computer engineering, and you can find out what you really like, whether it be the software side of things or the hardware side of things. And after that first semester, I liked both of them. So come to the end of 4 years, I was able to graduate with a double major in computer science and computer engineering, but also was still able to get a minor in history to keep that passion going. After school, I came into Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division at their DAMNAC activity. So that's where I've worked my entire career. I've had other jobs out in industry as well as part-time jobs. So kind of have a little bit of, both sides of the spectrum when it comes to software development and delivery. But at Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren Division, some of the work that I've done there, one of my first projects was with the Navy International Program Office. So working with their team to actually develop something to where they're sending out their experts, they're gathering all this information, and when they come back, they have a stack of PowerPoints or information in their head, and things get lost. So we developed a program for them to actually retain that knowledge. So later down the road, if somebody is researching into cooperative opportunity, maybe they see that, oh, well, this country has been working on this. So let's team up. Let's reduce those costs, reduce those development times by teaming up with them. So with that, the start of where I got into this DevOps, DevSecOps journey was with that that project right when I got in. So like I said, really had only 4 years of any coding experience. And if you were to tell me, hey, you're going to be doing stuff with artificial intelligence and, all the crazy buzzwords that we hear today, I would have, laughed and said, no, I'm just going to be, a programmer doing Java or whatever it may be. But right when I got with Dahlgren Division, I was sent over to SRI International, which was one of the contractors working with that project. and did about 2 to 3 weeks of training with SRI International on what are the best practices going on now. That's where I got into, containerizing applications, all these various things that you need in the development environment, and was really introduced early on to, what many see today as, the staples of doing DevOps or DevSecOps. So, coming along, yeah, and we'll get into this later as people, left the organization, left our team. I stayed along. I was really the only one who knew what the environment looked like. So, I was helping people set up their VMs, helping people set up their environments, containerizing any new, any of the new applications we had coming in. And somebody came along and said, "Oh, well, you're like the DevOps, DevSecOps person of this group." And I, looked at them and said, "I have no clue what any of those words mean." So, after researching into it, doing a rotational assignment with the Virginia Modeling and Simulation Center with Old Dominion University, really threw myself into what is, DevOps, DevSecOps. How do we implement that with the project? So, actually pushing those best practices, promoting what needs to be done. One of the positions that I recently took was the technical lead for our Dahlgren software factory, which just was recently started. I worked on the what we call the Software Factory Foundations team, which was a group of volunteers who, after work, would take a look at, what is Kubernetes? How do we bring, these best practices to the enterprise without, disrupting teams, putting in additional cost, what can we offer them to start adopting these best practices? So after, working as the technical lead, I was the acting technical lead. So they hired on somebody to be the full-time technical lead. And that gets into where I am at now. So I am with the Naval Systems Engineering Resource Center at Dahlgren, otherwise known as NSERC. And they provide, so they are a cost center. So they have a service catalog that allows their mission partners the full range of hosted service offerings, from anything from, DoD on-premise at Dahlgren to Microsoft Azure and AWS GovCloud, IL4, IL5, soon to be moving into the IL6 realm as well. Offering all the fun buzzwords of infrastructure as service, platform as service, software as service. And, NSERC really got into, what's great about them, they really got into the cloud game very early on when it was just coming about. So what was really nice is, as these, what are now the cloud brokers, were getting into it, they went to NIWC and said, "Hey, can we also get into the cloud? We can help you implement, what does a security stack look like? How do you get your ATO with the cloud? We will work with you." So they were one of the early adopters of it, which benefited them as, they helped out what would become the cloud broker. They were able to, lock in their fixed cost, which is now, great, as a lot of teams are moving to the cloud. And, you see those headaches of, well, this broker's, putting 50% on top of it. This broker's putting this much percent on top of our cost already. Whereas NSERC was able to lock in those rates early on for their help that they were able to provide, and really, conceptualizing, what does a security stack look like for an organization that is now in the cloud. So NSERC, just to give kind of an overview, we're not just Dahlgren. Since Dahlgren is a working capital fund, we're able to take on projects from outside of Dahlgren. So, we have over 150 programs supported with through SLAs, 88 with NAVC, 53 with Dahlgren, and 35 with other NAVC warfare centers, and then 66 of other DoD customers. And this kind of lays out, kind of what we're looking at as a portfolio within NSERC. We'll get into this a little bit later of, what does it look like for NSERC? Are we a software factory? Are we, competing with Platform One and all these? We're not right now. We're still in the very early stages of, what does it look like to provide those not only the services out to the customer, but the services in the sense of, what is DevSecOps? How do you implement these automated pipelines? What does security look like for your application? We want to have that full full spectrum of everything, not just providing out the services and saying, good luck, I hope you implement this correctly. So we take the approach of, for customer support, of having the service desk, the application support, delivery team, infrastructure team, and our vendor support. So we break these up, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit later as well, of we have our dedicated teams at Insert, but what we are trying to shift the culture to doing is you have your dedicated teams, but you also need your champions of change or your champions of innovation. So we have a group of, I would say, I think it's about 10 people now who come from these various groups that we have here that, really take a look at, the customers or are provided as a service to the customers to say, hey, these are our champions. If you need something, they can help you out in your individual case. It's not submit a ticket, wait for the ticket to be complete, and maybe your problem's resolved. We have, dedicated people to actually sit down with the customer and say, all right, let's take a look at your problem. We have everybody here from all the various groups within Insert, represented, that we can really understand your problem and get it taken care of. And then in the future, we have those lessons learned that we don't have to go back and really sit down with every customer and understand the problem again. We can say, oh, we've seen this before. Here's how to implement a solution. So like I said, Insert is offering those services, but what they really lacked in until recently was the that help of when a customer comes in or a team comes in, what is DevSecOps? How we have our program office telling us we need DevSecOps. How do we do that? And what you see right now with a lot of these service providers is they have the services, they will provide them to you, but there's really no support when you ask the question of, well, how do I really do DevSecOps, or can you help me implement DevSecOps? So, I was brought on with the Insert team to be their lead DevSecOps engineer to really come up with, that pathway to, how are we going to, provide to our teams that service of, when they have questions of automation, DevSecOps, general security, anything like that, how can we provide out those answers to them to where they feel, they're getting the level of service, not just in the tools, but the level of service and knowledge of, what are those best practices out there. And so that's why, we're enabling a DevSecOps culture, not a process. You need to have that culture built within your workforce. So, DevSecOps is an organizational software engineering culture and practice that aims to improve customer outcomes and mission value by automating, monitoring, and applying security at all phases of the software lifecycle. And what I mean by, we want a culture, not a process. It's not a one size fits all solution. You can't say, here's your DevSecOps process, put it into your project, team, application, whatever, and it's going to work. You really need to sit down with the customers and understand, what are the problems that you're having, and, how can we find a workable solution to have better outcomes? The example that I like to give is, everybody wants to say, well, let's reduce build times. Well, if the project's build time is, 2 minutes long and you reduce it by 10 seconds, is that really a win that you need? Or could you find somewhere else? Is it maybe, the testing phase? Is it the delivery phase that you could really focus in on and get those better outcomes? So, that little figure 8 diagram sometimes really confuses people. I found when talking about it, some people, especially when you want to try to show them where do you fit in within the DevSecOps lifecycle, they struggle to really find, where they fit in. So, this diagram has been put out before in various other publications for DevSecOps. And, this is what we like to use to, show our customers of, this is the DevSecOps lifecycle: plan, develop, build, test, release, or deliver, deploy, and operate. And then within all those, having that continuous feedback and monitoring. So, when we take a look at a project or a team coming in, one of the biggest questions that we ask them is, this is the DevSecOps lifecycle, but you don't have to have every single phase there. We have some teams that aren't deploying out to somewhere. Their process ends at release or deliver. And then, they deliver that product to, integrator or to their program office, whatever it may be. They may be a small cog in the larger system. So we really ask them, we say, don't try to fit this entire DevSecOps lifecycle into your project. Because you'll drive yourself crazy. Identify where does it end for you, for your project or your team? Where does it end for you? Where do you hand off or you stop work before you come back to, do planning and do development again? So, this goes back to sitting down, especially during that onboarding process, sitting down with the customer and understanding, what does the DevSecOps lifecycle look for you? What are your major headaches and where can we improve on those? So the way we are going about it at Insert is kind of a phased DevSecOps adoption migration strategy. The kind of crawl, walk, run, fly is how we're doing it. So, the crawl phase is what I like to call the Apollo 11 phase. So, just landing on the moon or landing in the cloud, really. For a lot of these teams, when you say, hey, you need to move to the cloud, you need to implement DevSecOps, your project has been going on for 30 years, but you need to do, all of this within the next month, go, is a daunting task for a lot of teams. So we take the approach of, really, hey, let's take your application, whether it be, monolithic or, whatever state it's in, and let's just put it on the cloud. Let's get you a VM and let's put it there. And, let's see how that goes. So we recently did this with, one of our teams who, basically took their entire setup, just threw it into a large VM on the cloud and took a look to see, is it operating the same? And, with great success. And, when you take a look at that, it's not, wow, they did something amazing. All you did was really move or shift where it was operating from. But, you can already see from their stakeholders and their sponsors that it was now within the cloud, now accessible from, anywhere. So they were a training system. So now instead of, somebody having to log in on a dedicated network, they could have somebody logged in from, Florida, California, Virginia, wherever, to log in and do these training events. So even with this Apollo 11 or crawl phase, there are, benefits to that, such as, your individual team productivity increases. You're now within a shared environment, especially if you have a distributed team. And then you have that ability to continue to experiment and test solutions. So what does that mean? That means now you're within the cloud environment. Now, can you, start experimenting with these automated, tools? Can you start experimenting with, cloud solutions? Whereas if you're sitting in, a server room or wherever it may be, you don't have access to that. And obviously, there are costs and risk of just staying at this phase and only doing this. So you still get, uncoordinated duplicate purchases. You still have those silos, redundant tools, all these things. So, you get into the walk phase where it's more of a, build your own or bring your own DevSecOps. So that's where we, whether the team has already been moved in the Apollo 11 phase or, the team's moving in now, that we say, hey, if you want to do DevSecOps or DevOps, bring your own tools in and, let's get you going. So, again, you're having the team really, set up their environment, set up their tools, link them together, and start to really get the basis of what DevOps or DevSecOps is. So the benefits, you're reducing tool licenses in some places. If you can provide, common or shared tools, you're reducing the training overhead, because a lot of these teams are bringing in the tools that they already know and want to use. You're going to have better collaboration across the teams, and then you're going to have your beginnings of automation. So right now, this is this walk phase, but between the walk phase and the next phase we're going to talk about is kind of where InCirc is sitting with its service offering. And when it comes to DevSecOps, like I said, we're still really in the beginning of what it looks like for, what we talk about in government as DevOps or DevSecOps. So the run phase is that best in class DevSecOps is how we see it. So we have all of our projects and teams within our cloud environment, on-prem environment, within our ecosystem. And now we're starting to really go, okay, well, we have a majority of teams that are using the Atlassian suite, or we have a majority of teams using GitLab. So we start to really define out, what's that best in class, tool set that we can start out to our teams kind of as a turnkey solution. But the other side of that is we don't want to lock ourselves into that tool set, because if there is a customer that comes to us and has a requirement for a different tool, we want to have that flexibility for them to be able to use it. We don't want to turn somebody away just because they don't want to use our tool set. So, with these best in class tools, we can have these established processes, this automated handoffs between the tools, because we know how they communicate. That increased governance and auditability and traceability within the tools. But as you saw in the last phase, that reduced training overhead, one of the risks with, having those best in class tools, you may need to provide some training for those tools and processes. So, like I said, if somebody or a team comes in and they weren't using these tools, it is going to be a bit of a learning curve for them. So you may, whether it be the team provide it or your organization provide it, need to have that training or at least knowledge base of, this is how you use these tools, or this is the process flow of how these tools are used together. And then, as we always say in DevSecOps or DevOps, it's not the tools, it's really the culture is the issue. So, once you get to this phase, really the tools aren't going to be a lot of the cost or risk. It's going to be your customer buy-in to these common tools. Do they really want to move to these, or have they been using something for 30 plus years that they just don't want to move away from? You're going to need some organizational investment. Is your organization going to invest in the infrastructure or, in the cloud to provide out, these services? And then, like I said, that customer resistance to the change, is that coming from, the customer, or is that, higher up organizationally? A lot of teams within NSWC Dahlgren are really, since we're working capital fund, the customer is really a program office. Are they the ones saying, well, you need to provide us with security scans from Fortify, and you need to use doors for requirements? So, is that customer resistance really coming from, the development team, or is that a, bigger conversation to the stakeholder level? And then the fly phase is where we really see, what that concept of software factory is. Of, we have a lot of these turnkey solutions, a lot of the tools already set in place, and the customer comes in and we can have it have them set up pretty quickly. So you're decreasing cycle times, your revenue is accelerated, higher collaboration among the teams, and improved security at every level. But then again, you're costing, especially with these tools that you're providing out, you're going to have some of that training. You can't overlook the training aspect, and you can't expect everybody coming in to know just how to use these tools, or the processes to link these tools together. Also, when it comes to a software factory, you're going to need that robust support team, on the infrastructure side, on the network side. to make sure that your services are up and running, high availability, whatever it may be. We've seen it time and time again where a service goes down, and that reaction time, the dwell time to actually get it back up and running can make or break an organization. A lot of customers get turned off when they can't access their tools, they can't push to their Git repository, whatever it may be. And again, one of the costs and risks of all this, you got to have that leadership buy-in. You got to have that organizational investment to keep this up and running, to want to do more with it. And so, one of the ways that we kind of gauge our success is by, the measuring of metrics. But you don't want to measure metrics just because you want to measure metrics. You actually want to. You don't want the paralysis by analysis. So we go by the SMART metrics. Is it specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time bound? So with these, we want to actually have metrics that we can act upon. You don't want to take metrics and go, okay, we have this metric, this is what it's showing, but it really doesn't show, give us a gauge of, are we doing well? Are we doing poorly? Whatever it is, you want something that, like it says, you can measure and you can have, an action on it. If we're doing poorly, how do we, take the next step to improve that? So kind of some of the trends for the future that I see, one of the things that I heard recently and I thought was a kind of a great really look into the federal government space, especially when it comes to software requirements, software products, is Conway's Law. And it was created by Melvin Conway, and it's any organization that designs a system defined broadly will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. So the law is based on the reasoning that in order for a product to function, the authors and designers of its component parts must communicate with each other in order to ensure compatibility between the components. So, with that, you take a look at, a government organization, especially a lot of these very large government systems. There's very little communication when it comes to, the various components. Very siloed, especially with the data. So working within the federal space, you see, a lot of, products being produced where, one organization produces a component, another produces a component, and they can't even talk to each other. So, things are retrofitted on the back end, it becomes a different system completely. And, that's exactly, how we see a lot of these things within the government. So one way that, or something that we need to change, and, this is a cultural change, is, for these products that need to be integrated together, they may be produced different fair centers or, different contractors. We need to open those lines of communication to be able to, design a system that is, going to work together. And, one of the ways to do that is with DevSecOps and having that shared ecosystem. So, finishing up with Conway's Law, therefore, the technical structure of a system will reflect the social boundaries of an organization that produced it, across which communication is more difficult. So, one of the big things, especially for me, as I mentioned before, of, working within an SWC Dahlgren, or really any government organization, is, people leaving the government. And, I like to say the government doesn't have a hiring problem. They can easily hire people. They have a retention problem, is really what it is, and what I see with that is, so, why a retention problem? So one of the examples I put up is, let's take a look at training and continuous learning. So what did training and learning look like 20, 30 plus years ago? Well, when you needed to work on a new system, operate a new system, really do anything new, what you did was you pulled out the giant phone book manual, you opened it up and you started reading through it. Then after you've read through it, you sit down and start going through the operation of that, whether it be system, component, whatever it is. So what does it look like today? Well, today, if anybody has any kids, if they get a new video game or a new toy or anything like that, the first thing that gets thrown out is the instruction manual. It's really a trial and error type of learning. So they like to do it, they like to fail, take a step back, do it again until they succeed and get to, the end goal. And now as we have, a lot of the younger workforce coming in, and this is not just the workforce of, somebody producing software or a product. This is also, talking about the war fighters, the people who are going to operate these systems. How do we tailor our training to the kind of this new style of learning of let's go ahead and fail forward and fail fast. And then take a step back and, hit those successes until we get to the final goal. That's where I see kind of this, a new age of training that needs to come about, which I'll talk a little bit more on in the next coming slides. So we need to have that flexible training because obviously we still have those who like to sit down, read through the manual, and then, start working on a product or system or whatever it may be. So how do we have that flexibility to really train people the way they want to be trained, or have people learn the way they want to learn? And one of the other retention problems, I think this is the biggest one, especially with a younger workforce, is, you come into the government and, I'm working for the government, I'm making a difference, I'm doing something, for the war fighter, for my country. And then they get in and, they seem to get disillusioned. So why is that? And the way I see that is in private industry, how long would it take for somebody to see a change in a product? With the company that I worked for part-time, it was on a weekly basis. I could see my changes going into the product. I knew I had developed, that feature. I knew I had developed, what that system was doing. And, it felt good that, it was going out to customers were using something I had to developed. And then you take a look at and how long does it take to see a change in a product? For example, a warfare system, a combat system. A lot of developers, even, some who have been with the government for 10 plus years, still haven't seen their changes or something they worked on be deployed out to the fleet. There's such a long lead time for something to get deployed out that, they get disillusioned that, I'm working on something and then it disappears and I'm working on the next thing, which also probably won't go anywhere. So that's where I see that disillusion, that I want to do more. I want to be able to deliver something and say, I did that. People want to make a difference in the work that they're doing. And, they are making a difference. It may eventually get deployed out, but, they probably won't see it. And, that's the big key thing, that people want to see the difference that they're making. And sometimes within the federal government, it's hard to see that. And, one of the things with DevSecOps and, continuous ATOs and this automation is, let's get these things out to the fleet faster. And I think if we can do that, this retention issue that we're having will actually start to diminish, as somebody can say, well, yeah, I worked on that system. I know, I see the work that I did out in the fleet now. And so, along with the retention question there's something that I came across called the Peter Principle. And if you haven't heard it, it comes from a 1969 book. It was actually intended to be satire, but makes a really great point, especially within organizations. So the Peter Principle states that a person who is competent at their job will earn a promotion to a position that requires different skills. If the promoted person lacks the skills required for the new role, they will be incompetent at the new level and will not be promoted again. So if the person is competent in their new role, they'll be promoted again and will continue to be promoted until they reach a level at which they are incompetent. So what does that mean? So you can have, as we all see computer programmers, you can have a computer programmer who will sit in a room and code some of the best code of it that you've ever seen, code some of the best systems and products you've ever seen. And we say, wow, he's a really competent coder. So, let's put him in charge of, the development group. Let's move him up to Scrum Master. Well, he may not have the people skills to manage a team, and he may not be producing code anymore. He may be more in a management role. So he is now doesn't have those skills to make him succeed. And, as it states here, they reach a level which they are incompetent and stay there. But we also see where the individual is at that level of incompetence, or what we perceive as incompetence, and they get fired because, it seems that they aren't, working at the level that they used to. So you see this a lot, in the government, especially with this retention issue, that somebody leaves, we, have a great coder, we have somebody doing great work at what they're doing now, they get promoted up, but they don't have those skills yet for the position that they're promoted to. So this, what they call being incompetent, the individual not qualify for the promotion again, or could be fired. So they will remain stuck at what they call the final placement or Peters plateau, where they're not advancing in their career, which, also kind of goes to the retention problem as well of, they're not advancing, or they feel that they're, incompetent at the job that they're doing. So this begs the question of, how do we give, our workforce those skills to be promoted, to be successful, and understand that if they get promoted, understand that they may not have the skills yet for that job. Just like you going through college, you may not have all the skills for whatever major you're going for, but you continuously learn them, you practice them. How do we set up a training program or a mentor program to promote the skills that somebody is seeking? And how do we have the tolerance to actually, work with individuals, not see them as incompetent, but see them as a work in progress for the position they've been promoted to? I thought this was a really great paradigm, even though it's supposed to be satire, really great paradigm for a lot of organizations to really think about, when somebody gets promoted, is it a good thing, or maybe it's actually a bad thing? So there's a need to innovate. So when you take a look at, where was the innovative workforce during the Second World War? You had, a lot of the military organizations, Oak Ridge, Dahlgren, the Manhattan Project were the ones. When you looked at, GE, or any of what we would, understand as contractors now, they didn't want scientists. They wanted people to make airplanes, vehicles, weapons. So, now where's our innovative workforce? Well, DARPA was created in 1958, ONR in 1946. We've kind of shifted our innovation away from, the government, to put it onto the contractors, to academia and others. And the government is kind of just the integrator, or, the ones giving the money to them to say, hey, we want to do this thing. So, we need to empower the government workforce to do those innovative things again. And the way to do that is to establish those sandbox areas, disconnected areas to test and innovate. You want, like I said, fail forward and fail fast with no repercussions. And you don't want to have somebody, never say no because of security or other typical government excuse of why this can't happen. You want this to happen. You want them to do that, those testing, those DevSecOps best practices, when they say, well, how do I integrate security? Give them an area to test things out, to do that. And then, we need to make that a part of workforce training. Not just sitting in a classroom, but actually getting hands-on and doing the things that we want them to do. And like I said, you want those champions to change, like INSERC is doing. Get your people that want to promote these culture change, want to promote best practices, have motivation through innovation, give them the ability to break the norm and do the extraordinary. And to wrap up, as we're getting towards the end, one of Dahlgren's greatest alumni was Grace Hopper. And she said, humans are allergic to change. They love to say, we've always done it this way. I try to fight that. That's why I have a clock on my wall that runs counterclockwise. And it is well known that she did have that clock in her office at Dahlgren. And also the most dangerous phrase in the language is, we've always done it that way. So, we always want to promote change, always be thinking about, how can something, how can something be done differently, even if it's working at its best, always having that in mind of, can we do it a different way? I think is wise words of wisdom. And with that, I'd like to thank ATARC for having me speak on this. I hope I wasn't too long-winded.
That was great, Ian. You actually have one question in the chat. If you could speak to how low-code platforms factor into this, into NSERC?
Yeah, so right now we do not have any low-code platforms within INSERC. It is something that we would be willing to look at. But right now it's mostly, we have our development teams, developing the code. But, as different projects are coming up, especially within Dahlgren, our corporate side, building, various, I know they have teams that build websites for the departments at Dahlgren that could benefit from, the low-code platforms or options out there.
Thanks,
Hey,
Ian.
Ian,
Go ahead, Steve.
as I say, are you working with the Navy Forge? We were working with HUD Lemons down at the NSWC on the Monterey and the virtual pilot ship initiative for the Aegis combat system, and basically doing a net DevOps concept for network infrastructure, and really taking it to a CI/CD pipeline approach by doing model-based systems engineering. I assume that's the direction you're going, right?
Yes, that's correct. And the Forge right now actually is utilizing INSERC for their cloud offerings, as Platform One, Black Pearl are really getting stood up and understanding, their operation model. So yes, we have the Forge at NSWC Dahlgren operating off of the INSERC infrastructure as a service.
And just to give you an example, I mean, on the Monterey, by deploying the technologies you guys are talking about, it went from like a 4-year update to deliver new software to the fleet to 4 weeks. So the impact can be amazing, even if it is not in minutes and seconds. But I mean, you're really improving the rapidity by which you can deploy.
Oh yes, definitely.
Richie Balkasoon had a comment that he wishes leadership thought like this. So do you have any thoughts around how to get leadership to understand that failure is an option?
Yes. So, our way of doing it. So Dahlgren Software Factory, we had the Software Factory Foundation team, no funding. It was all volunteer, and it was basically taking a pilot project. And it was a lot of trial and error. A lot of the updates were, well, we're still working on this. We're having issues with these few things. Obviously we weren't wasting money. We weren't using up additional resources, but they really didn't believe us until, fortunately, but unfortunately, when COVID-19 hit, the pilot project that we had was able to continue operations. They did not need to be in their laboratory. They had their systems now deployed out onto Kubernetes, and they were doing updates from their houses. So, you're now reducing overhead from, the lab space was not needed. The servers were coming to end of life, so they were going to have to order new ones. It was no longer needed. It's really showing leadership, even that, that was a big win for us. But even if it's not a major win, having those small wins to say, hey, we're deploying out a lot faster, we're delivering a lot faster, or our build times have now been reduced by, from an hour to 30 minutes. Those small wins eventually build up to that big win.
I'm on mute. Okay. A couple other comments in the chat if you want to review those. First one, Barb asks, what are you doing to promote continuous learning now? And do you currently measure the KSAs of your teams?
Yes. So for continuous learning, the way we are promoting that is, we well, especially with Insert, we allow our team to go out and, try new things. If it's, hey, I want to test Kubernetes, within this network, and, actually put a CI/CD pipeline on it. We're given the ability to go out and, actually do that. So it's a very hands-on approach when it comes to continuous learning that, we don't want to say, okay, well, go read the Microsoft documentation and, let's find out if we can do it, or, oh, that's going to cost some money. Let's wait until we get, whether it be something from, a grant from Dahlgren to do this. And, right now, we're not really tracking the knowledge, skill, abilities, but that is something that we should do in the eventual future, especially as, we want to promote that collaboration among, all the teams at Dahlgren or within the Insert ecosystem, to know that, this team has these specific skills. We have another team over here that is really lacking. Can we connect them together and, help promote both of them?
Thanks, Ian. And then Stephen asks, as you discuss cultural changes around fast fail and hands-on training, how much of this is division and teams changing approaches versus Navy policy and official HR direction?
Yeah, so this is all mostly at the team level or division level. And when I talk about division level, what was interesting with Dahlgren as well, right at the onset of COVID-19, our 5-year plan had expired. So we were, in the process of updating, what were the goals that we wanted in the next 5 years, and one of those being, software development. Implementing these new best practices coming out. So we actually put into our 5-year plan, we want to implement, these best practices out there. We want to put out a policy to promote, these software teams moving to cloud, moving to agile, moving to automation. So we were fortunate that we, had the leadership buy-in at, the Dahlgren level. When it comes to the Navy policy, and the higher up policy, the way that, Insert has taken the approach is, as long as we are within the policy, and we've had this fight with, a couple of the higher ups of, well, why are you doing this? This is already being done, elsewhere. As long as we're within the policy and we can operate and we are, security compliant, well, whatever compliance it may be, we want to continue to operate. We are, coming in, allowing teams, an option, a low budget option. We are, allowing teams into the environment that may not be doing, DevSecOps, to the level of maybe Platform One or somebody else. So, what I would say for, teams or organizations trying to do this is really, ensure that you're, compliant with, what you need. And, it is good to have that pushback. It is good to say, well, we're executing, we're, actually doing this. We have teams wanting to come and, work in our environment. We're compliant, and, unless you can offer us a better rate or offer us, more computing infrastructure, we're going to continue to do what we do.
Thank you, Ian. So unless anyone has any other questions or comments, I will go ahead and I want to share our event that's coming up in Annapolis, Maryland. It's on May 1st through the 3rd, and it'll be one of our big first in-person events back. So please go ahead and register. If you're coming from in out of town, there's an option to book a room reservation as well on our webpage. And this will be a 3-day conference, and it'll be a lot of fun, and it would be really great to meet all of you guys in person or see you again for the last, I guess it's been like 2-3 years or something like that. So please go take a look at that. And Ian, I just want to thank you so much for sharing this with us. This is such an insightful presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm going to have the recording available probably by the end of today. So I'll share it out with our DevOps and our digital transformation mission area folks.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank
Great
you
job, Ian.
everyone for attending, and great questions too. All right, talk to you guys later. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye.